Good morning. It's fairly early on a Sunday morning. Um, if we were meeting at Howland, I would not have left my house yet. But I've had 2 cups of coffee. I'm feeling pretty good. And something amused me just a little while ago, just before I turned this on. But I'm having a senior moment. I started to say a Joe Biden moment, but that wouldn't be nice, would it? Well, here we are. And I think this is what amused me. I wish you could see. Look at this. I didn't look at it after they printed it. I just put it in the bag and brought it home. And this is so tiny. Oh my goodness gracious. They must have thought I was 40 years younger. But even then, I couldn't have read it without my glasses. But we'll try it and hope. You see, if I don't turn that way, I don't get the glare on my glasses. I'll just turn back this way. There are lots of ways to. Well, enough chit chat. Let's go. We're talking about the Ten Commandments, and this is our second week to talk about the Ten Commandments. I can see that glare distracts me. If I can't do it, I'll just stick it way up close to my face, and you'll understand. It'll be like Jonathan Edwards, "Sinners in the hands of an angry God." That was his sermon, and he read it. They say he was very nearsighted, but I guess it was effective. I suppose. At least it's famous, as was and is Jonathan Edwards. Well, last week, in introducing the Ten Commandments in the Sunday school hour, we talked about the difference between grace and law, and I'm going to touch on that for a little while in our sermons, and it's an important thing for us to understand that God's grace and God's law, let's go together. This is not an Old Testament versus New Testament thing. This is God's grace, and it is by faith through the grace of God that anyone who is saved ever in the history of the universe has been saved. You see that the New Testament writers, Paul especially, talks about Abraham. Abraham was saved by grace through faith. Noah was saved by grace through faith. Must be going to have company. Salvation by grace through faith. That is always the plan of God. So, maybe I'll move this way. If I'm not careful, I'm going to have to just start smack dab over. At any rate, today we're going to look at the first 4 commandments. So, the foundational statement in Exodus 20. Go ahead. You knew we were going to be in Exodus 20 because many of you have read the Sunday school lesson. And if you haven't, be apprised of the fact that for the next 4 weeks after today, we're going to be looking at the 20th chapter of Exodus, no matter what else we may look at. So we'll always be in Exodus 20 when we're talking about the 10 Commandments in this series. You know, you can go to Deuteronomy and find the commandments, but we use the Exodus 20 passage. This is the foundational statement in verse 2. I am the Lord your God who rescued you from the land of Egypt, the place of your slavery. That's it. God is reminding his people of what he has done. He wants them to know who he is. Who is God? God is the Lord. The Lord is God. Jehovah is God. I am Jehovah. I am the Lord your God. He had told Moses when he went to Egypt, went back to Egypt. When he talked to him in Midian out of the burning bush, he had told him, the people will listen to you. And Moses kept arguing about it. He said, who am I going to say sent me? And he said, tell them I am has sent you. They would not utter the name of Jehovah or Yahweh or the Lord. The notation is made, and this is the way that it is translated. I am the Lord. I am Yahweh. I am Jehovah, your God. I rescued you out of the land of Egypt, where you had been enslaved for 350 or 400 years. And then we have the first and second commandments here. Number 1, this is the first commandment. You must not have any other God but me. And most of the translations say no gods before me, and always with a note that it might mean no God beside me. And the fact of the matter is that it means there will be no other God. The second commandment is similar to the first. You must not make for yourself an idol of any kind, or an image of anything in the heavens, or on the earth, or in the sea. You must not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God who will not tolerate your affection for any other gods. Let's think about this for a minute, because there are several points. There's more than 3 that I'd like to mention about these 2 verses. First of all, these people had been living among the Egyptians, and God had promised them a land of their own, and the land to which they were going was the land of the Canaanites. So let's talk about the Egyptians for a minute, and let's talk about the Canaanites for a minute. The Egyptians worshipped a lot of gods. Listen. It's hard to imagine something that was not a god for the ancient Egyptians. During one time or another, they worshipped cats, they worshipped birds, they worshipped rocks, they worshipped pharaohs, they worshipped beetles. I'm not talking about a singing group either. I'm talking about bugs. Yeah, they worshipped bugs. They worshipped human figures with animal heads. At least that's what they drew on the sides of their caves and in their other drawings. I've always found that amusing, but I have read and I understand some of the reasons for them. They worship the Sphinx. They worship the sun. They worship the moon. They worship temple statues. They worshiped temple shrines. Most of the people couldn't worship in the temple because the temple, those great grand temples that you can still see the ruins of along the Nile River, I would love to go there and see those someday. That's on my bucket list. May not make it. It seems like it could be dangerous nowadays. But what I want to do is to sit on a camel, have my picture taken just like my parents did in front of the Sphinx. That's one of my goals. But they worshipped the Sphinx. They worshipped outside the temples. The common people were not allowed to go into the temple. Talk about all the elaborate mummies and the elaborate burial ceremonies. That's just for the very rich people. It's not for the common people, not for the poor people, not for the middle class, if there was a middle class in Egypt. Well, they worshipped from time to time snakes and various other carved images of gods. I don't think that the people who started making idols were necessarily bad people. They had some kind of a sense within them that said there is someone greater than we, and they began to carve out images so that they could look at something greater than we, and they could bow in front of them. So it was probably not a thing that was begun maliciously, but it certainly can become a terrible thing. And what God has said to his people is, there is one God, I am one, and you will worship me. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one God. That is that's the Shema, the chant that is done even to this day. Hear, O Israel, the Lord, that is Jehovah, Yahweh, your God is one. Well, in addition to these Egyptian religions, I want you to understand something else. The Mesopotamian religions also had multiple gods, and the Canaanites were no different from the Mesopotamians. They were their religions were similar because they had come from about the same place. Mesopotamia means between the rivers, the Euphrates on the west side and the Tigris on the east side. And the Mesopotamian religions all were pretty much the same, and they all, even though they named the gods differently depending on who who was in charge, what country was in charge, whether it was the Assyrians or the Babylonians or the Sumerians. It doesn't make any difference. They just renamed the gods and had the same stories and the same gods. But the people of Israel had seen idol worship, and they had seen multiple gods with the Egyptians. That's what they had grown up with. That was everything that their culture told them about, except that they always had the story that was being told to them about the Lord, the one God, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph, that God. They always had those stories. But what they saw around them was the Egyptians worshiping many gods. What they would see when they got to Canaan would be the Canaanites worshiping many gods. So they had to be reminded here, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of slavery. You will have no other gods, and you will not make any graven image. What was the matter with a graven image? What's the matter with a statue like that? Well, we've seen a lot of them, haven't we? I think this, to create a graven image, to mold an image and bow down and worship it, is kind of an attempt to control your God. The ancients would take it didn't make any soapstone to gold. It didn't make any difference what the material was. If you were wealthy, you might have golden gods. If you were not, you might have soapstone gods, or you might even have wooden carved gods, because people were very, very talented, and they could make these household gods look very, very nice. I'm not talking about something, some great elaborate temple at this point. I'm talking about household gods. We would almost look at them as fetishes, but because you could put them in a small box like a medicine cabinet, and when it was time to pray to a particular god, just open the medicine cabinet, pull out the god, close the cabinet, put the god up on your, I don't care. That big, didn't make any difference. Could you carry it in your pocket? Could you carry it in your purse? It didn't matter. As long as you could take it out and put it away. And I think while many people want to do that with God at all time, when I need him, I'll get him. And when I don't need him, I'll put him back in the medicine cabinet. I think a lot of people treat God that way even now. But idol worshiping is an attempt to control God or to control the gods. I can pull that God out and I can pray to it, and I will demand that God give me what I ask for if I do a good job. The thrust of these two verses is not simply that a person should not build an idol. It is that nothing stands between God and the person. Nothing should stand between God and me. Not my daughter, not my son, not my parents, not my grandgirls, not my church, not my job, not my work, not the Baylor Bears, not the Dallas Cowboys. Nothing stands between God and me. Now that's God's command. God is known to his people through his word, not through some statue, no matter how beautiful it may be. I have seen some of the most beautiful statues in the world. I think one of them is the Pieta. As you walk into the great St. Peter Basilica in Rome, and you turn to your right, and there's the Pieta. It's sitting behind the glass because somebody came in there and tried to break it with a hammer. I don't know how they thought they were going to do that. They didn't realize it was carved out of marble, and it took a whole lot more than just one chip. But they put it behind the glass now so nobody can get to it. It's magnificent. It is beautiful. But if a person tries to worship it, what we need to do is to see a beautiful piece of art, not an object of worship. You go down to the altar, you may look at the cross, you may look at the chair, you may look at the various statues of the saints, but you don't worship those. You just look at them and admire the art. And it might make you think about what it was in which they were at some point involved. And this might bring you to a point at which you can worship God. But you have to worship God through his word, you see. Joy Davidman wrote Smoke on the Mountain. And it's just a study of the Ten Commandments. And it's a challenging study, and I recommend it for anybody who wants a challenging study. Joy Davidman was married briefly to C.S. Lewis before her death. She died of cancer not long after they were married. But in that book, she asks the question, what shape is your idol? See, it doesn't have to be a carved image. An idol can be anything that stands between you and the Lord. So, very quickly, commandment number 3. You will not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Now, let's take a parenthesis here. The first 4 commandments deal with our relationship to God. After that, then the commandments deal with our relationship with other people. The first commandments, vertical, our relationship to God. The last ones, horizontal, our relationship with other people. Now, this is a common thing in the Bible. Look, You look at the Beatitudes. You have the Beatitudes that Jesus set forth in the Sermon on the Mount, early in the Sermon on the Mount, 5th chapter of Matthew. And he said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the mourners, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who are hungry and thirsty for righteousness." All of these have to do with our relationship to God. That we mourn, that we recognize our spiritual bankruptcy, that we mourn that we surrender ourselves, that's meekness, surrender ourselves to God, and that we hunger and thirst after God's word, after God's righteousness. And then he starts to talk about how the foundation having been laid with our relationship to God, he talks about how we then relate to other people. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are the persecuted. All of these have to do with our relationship to other people. Jesus is asked, what is the greatest commandment? He says, love God with all your heart and your mind, your soul. Love God. That's a horizontal, a vertical relationship. The horizontal relationship, love your neighbor as yourself. This is the theme. And so we come to this point at which he says, now, you shall not misuse the name of the Lord. We're still dealing with our relationship to God. Here's something that I found. The third commandment, I'm reading. The third commandment is not just a nice Nelly warning against profanity, because sometimes it's what we think about. I'm squeamish about hearing someone use the Lord's name in vain. It just bothers me. I know I don't mean to be the nice Nelly, but I don't like it. I don't like it. It's something I've grown up with. Maybe it's a cultural thing, or maybe it has to do with this. But Miss Joy says it's more than that. It's much more like the sort of warning that you see around a power plant. Danger, high voltage. Where there is power, human beings will try to use it for their own ends. And folks, people will try to use the Lord's name for their own ends. Some people will call on the name of God in order to make other people believe them. We, in our courts, we put our hand on a Bible, or in the case of a Muslim, maybe a hand on the Quran with the same law, and we swear by God that we are going to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So when we hear, don't we hear this a lot? I mean, politicians do this all the time. It makes me uncomfortable when our leaders begin to pronounce begin to shade for political ends. I don't like it. I don't know that any of these politicians, whether they're Republican or Democrat or Independent, I'm not sure what their relationship is with the Lord. It would seem to me that our Vice President, Mike Pence, has a nice relationship with the Lord. I may not agree with all of his political stances, but I think he has a good relationship with the Lord. I know that Jimmy Carter, who was probably not he was not a very effective president, but he was a good Christian man, taught Sunday school at that little Baptist church over there in Georgia, and continued to do so until just recently. Some of these, it's hard to balance politics, which is a game of power, and worship of God. It's hard because Jesus is not there for today. Jesus is not there for the political issues of the day. That's what the Pharisees wanted him to do. That's what his disciples wanted him to do and thought he was going to do. Jesus was not there for political purposes. Jesus was here in order to show us who God is. Jesus was here in order to make way for us to enter into the presence of God. That's why Jesus came. Jesus came to save us, not to enter into the political arena. And he did not do so. Well, as many times as people tried to drag him there, he didn't do it. So when we hear someone invoking the name of God, let's be very, very careful. Let's be very careful. Do not misuse the name of the Lord, because the Lord will not hold him guiltless who misuses his name. The fourth, I've got no time left. It's almost time for big church. No time left. Honor the Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Accept all of God's gifts. The Sabbath is a gift from God. And so it's a day to rest. It is a day to worship. It is a day set aside for the Lord and for yourself. 7 days will you labor, 6 days will you labor, and on the seventh day rest. God set the example for us. The story in the Old Testament of the creation is a story that tells us that we need to take our rest. It doesn't mean that God takes a day off. It means that God has provided an example for us. Take your rest. Take your rest. Well, we have to go now. But listen, we're going to be in church in just a minute, or in just, let's say, 5 minutes. 5 minutes till church time. The ladies have already started playing. We're going to talk about fear of God. Fear of God. I'll see you in a minute.